Now we have as the next speaker Mr. Kerim Balci. Kerim Balci is a Turkish writer, a journalist, and an academician, and he's also the editor-in-chief of Turkish Review, which is a bi-monthly journal focusing primarily on Turkish politics and foreign policy, international affairs, and global economics. And he's also contributing as a columnist in today's Zaman and Zaman dailies, both the largest circulating newspapers in their area and in the Middle East. He studied physics and political science and international relations in the Bosphorus University of Turkey, and he has also an MA from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he also served as the representative of Zaman Turkish Daily for 8 years. And he is currently a PhD candidate at the Durham University of the UK on linguistic philosophy. You have the floor.
My topic is about the actors of change in the modern Middle East. I am going to dwell mainly on political or non-political Islamist or Islamically sensitive actors. In fact, these are the rising actors in the modern Middle East. I will categorize the actors according to their political activism and violence. In the first category, there are political violent groups within which I will put Hamas and Hezbollah that are already mentioned. In the second category, we have political but non-violent groups, largely to a certain extent Muslim Brotherhood in several countries of the Middle East, and the Al-Nahda, the Renaissance Party of Tunis for the time being, and AK Party of Turkey are in this group. There are apolitical violent movements in the Middle East. When I use the term apolitical, I don't mean non-political. These groups do have political positions, but they either do not establish political party, or whenever they establish political party, they are not there to run for governing positions. They don't have actually a political agenda to change the regime or to change how the government is run. Interestingly, many people misunderstand the case of the Salafi Wahhabi groups. The Salafi Wahhabi groups all are apolitical violent groups. True, they do support Sharia, but they don't support Sharia as a system of governance. They don't want to come to government. Whenever Salafi groups actually come to power after a fight with the infidels, as they call their rivals, they usually transform themselves into either political violent groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. This is the case with the Afghan situation and the Taliban, which is not itself a Salafi group, but it is a kind of transformation of Salafi groups into a political violent group, or they convert into political non-violent groups like Muslim Brotherhood when they come to power. And the fourth group, so we can count political parties like An-Nur party in Syria, or militant groups like An-Nusra, Jabhatun Nusra, which is mentioned already in Syria, or Shahab movement in Ethiopia and Somali particularly, and Boko Haram of Nigeria as violent but apolitical movements. In the fourth group, I will count apolitical and non-violent groups. I will mention particularly the Hizmet movement of Turkey, which has already become a global phenomenon, and the Sufi movements of Turkey, of Morocco, Maghreb, and some Central Asian countries. I will turn back to the list and speak a bit about what kind of actors of change these groups are. The first group was political violent groups. I mentioned Hamas and Hezbollah. What we observe in their strategies of change in the society, we do see that they come to power through either elections or using violence. In the case of Iranian Islamic Revolution, we see, for example, a political group coming to power through a revolution, but they didn't continue on being violent, so I didn't put the Iranian Revolution into this category, and I don't foresee any kind of similar change in the Middle East in the foreseeable future. But the parties or militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, they come to power using elections, but there is real concern whether they will leave the power through elections. In fact, Hezbollah holds only 10 out of 128 chairs in the Lebanese parliament, but it has the upper hand in the government because it has a kind of coalition with Al-Amal, which is a Shiite organization also which has more chairs in the parliament. Everybody is concerned about the future of Hamas. Hamas does have a dual identity. It is a political party on the one hand. It is a terrorist organization on the other hand. The militant wing is a terrorist organization. But everybody knows that they came to power in West Bank and in Gaza, and then later they were imposed to move into Gaza only in 2005. And it's already almost 10 years that they are in power and no further elections were made. The same is true for Al-Fatah in Palestinian case. The Palestinian president has lost its democratic legitimacy for already 7 years, but no further elections are made to replace him because everybody is afraid that Hamas is going to win the presidential palace also. So either for tactical reasons or for their internal problems with the future of democracy, these groups come to power with elections, but they have never been tested in the sense that whether they will leave the power when they lose the elections. They use violence against their antagonists to suppress any kind of meaningful opposition. They use the pretext of an occupation to legitimize use of violence, but usually they don't differentiate between violence against occupiers. In the case of Hamas, for example, they don't differentiate between violence against Israeli occupiers or Al-Fatah sympathizers, or in cases even their own sympathizers. So violence has turned out to be a kind of style of life for them. It's not just a tactical issue. I will move to political non-violent movements, and I will dwell more here on AKP of Turkey. But I mentioned already Muslim Brotherhood, mainly of Egypt and also of Syria. Unfortunately, because of the civil war in Syria, the Muslim Brotherhood of Syria has turned into a violent resistance group. So it is not a good time to speak about them as non-violent political actor. But certainly, Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood has stayed largely throughout its history as a non-violent political actor. And Nahda has passed the test of coming to the government through elections, but once again, it hasn't passed any test of leaving the government through elections. Certainly, the constitution was very inclusive, and we all applaud the developments in Tunisian context and regard the wisdom of Ghannouchi and his party to include other segments, particularly the secular segments of the society, in the making of the constitution process. But we still do not know what will happen if in the next elections and Nahda loses the election, whether they will leave the government willfully or not. Once again, this group of parties are not tested by losing in the elections. They are tested by winning in the elections, but not tested by losing the elections. The same is true for AKP of Turkey. AKP has been winning consecutively for 3 terms in general elections, 3 times in local elections, twice in referendums. From 2002 upwards, AKP won all the elections or referendums that they joined. This is, of course, something wonderful for their own account. But speaking about democratization in the Middle East, we have to underline the fact that AKP has never passed a test of losing an election. We have never seen AKP in opposition. It was always in government, and a complete democracy needs to see parties in opposition also, whether they are performing well as opposition parties or not. Whenever these political groups, meaning political non-violent groups, they come to power, they usually face either military interventions or secularist old establishment interventions. It was not easy in the case of AK Party in Turkey to rule between 2002 and 2011. Several times the army intervened, not violently, but in a postmodern coup style. They published letters in their own website, and in 1997, a previous government of Necmettin Erbakan, once again from the same political line, had to step down on the face of a website letter that was put on the website of the Turkish General Chief of Staff of Army. So the army continued on intervening several times, and it seems that the Ergenekon case that already Akira mentioned was at least one of the cases of the ex-military generals, some parts of the previous secularist establishment plotting against the government, in fact plotting to start a civil war in the country and using that pretext in order to call the army into duty, meaning intervening into the daily working of the Turkish democracy. Well, the challenge with the political non-violent Islamist groups is the longer they stay in power, the larger the possibility that they will get used to replace the deep state or the establishment. That is exactly what we have been observing for the last 3 years in Turkey. The AKP that has done enormous reforms for the Turkish democracy and for Turkey's membership to the European Union in the first 10 years of their rule, but in the last 3 years, this is this 3rd term of AKP in governance. The AKP started to turn into the former state or the establishment which excludes others and which started to show more and more authoritarian reflexes on the face of the oppositions. They usually want to change the people through use of state mechanisms. The logic of Muslim Brotherhood or AK Party is this. A small group of people, they establish a political party, they convince the general society that the things are not going in the way the general society wants, particularly on religious aspects of our daily lives. So they say, give us the power, we will educate a religious generation. When they come to power, they usually use only legitimate means of social engineering. They intervene into the curriculum of the national education in Turkey in the last 3 years. AKP, this is not a criticism, I'm just presenting you the facts. AKP put in extra Quranic courses into high school. These are not obligatory, these are selective courses of Quran, and the life story or biography of the Prophet are put into high school education. They have established more and more Imam Khatib schools. These are state-run religious schools where the education is not religious, but it's still a secular education, but the students have more access to religious courses like learning Arabic, or learning how to recite the Quran according to the rhythm of the Quranic recitation, and learning more about traditions of Islam like hadith and seer, the biography of the Prophet. In that sense, their change in the society is a kind of upside from top-down model. They come to government and they try to change the society afterwards. To a certain extent, I can say this is kind of vanguard party strategy of Leninism. Lenin also believed that it was impossible to convince the whole society first to become Marxists, but instead first to come to power and then forcefully convert the whole society into Marxism. I'm not claiming that they are Marxists, but they are clearly Islamists, but they are using the same strategy. One thing has to be underlined. None of these political parties aim for Sharia. Neither Muslim Brotherhood nor An-Nahda or AK Party. Sometimes Western observers make the mistake looking at Egypt and saying, look, Muslim Brotherhood wanted to write into the constitution that the religion of Egypt is Islam. Well, this was written down when Egypt was a fully secular country also. Egypt was a Sharia state during the Hosni Mubarak era. Egypt was a Sharia state, and during Anwar Sadat era, during King Farouk era also. The reference to Sharia or the Quranic law in the context of northern Africa is rather, it is not a legal reference, it is rather a cultural reference to Sharia as a kind of guidance of making new laws. Muslim Brotherhood does not look for establishing a Sharia state, but it gives lip service for the sake of convincing their supporters, lip service to the Sharia rhetoric. In the case of Turkey also, nobody can claim that the AKP is trying to establish Sharia in Turkey. On the face of the recent corruption scandals, we can say they will be the very first people who will be punished under a Sharia system. So I don't believe they will ever, never mention Sharia as the best stage of ruling. But their main obstacle is their failure to reach to the hearts of the secular half of their peoples. Both in the case of Egypt and in the case of Turkey, we have seen both Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt and AKP of Turkey, they were looking towards the 50% of the society as possibly convincible grassroots. They were not looking to the second half of the society. So when AKP received 50% of the votes in 2011, the leadership of AKP believed that they received all the votes of Turks, because they never appealed to the second half. They never believed that they can convince them. So this was the maximum that they were expecting, and they received the maximum. In such a case, of course, power brings a kind of poisonment in the leadership of AKP, and the third term of AKP unfortunately turned out to be a reverse trend. We are stepping backwards from democratization reforms and certainly from European membership reforms. I will move to Salafi groups. These are mainly Saudi-supported groups or the Gulf region-supported groups. They really ask for Sharia, but they don't think Sharia asks for an Islamic state. So Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria, if they ever win the fight, they are not going to look for becoming the rulers of the new Syria. Even if they do, they won't ask for an Islamic state. They will say Sharia is our lifestyle, but the state can be run in the local style that was here. In the case of Afghanistan, we have seen that when the fight was won against the Americans, the Taliban, or previously against the Russians, the ruling didn't become a Sharia or Islamic ruling. It became a confederation of tribes, which was okay with the Al-Qaeda groups there. In the case of several Northern African or Sub-Saharan African countries, we do see violent Salafi groups, but they do not try to become governors. In fact, they don't have any project of how to govern the country. They don't have economic projects, for example. They don't have any alternative. They don't have education projects even. In fact, Salafis adore ignorance. One simple case of Buka Haram is very telling. Buka Haram, in the local language, book is book in English. Haram is forbidden. Buka Haram means book, meaning any English book, is forbidden. So in that sense, the Salafi groups do not want people to become more literate. They love illiteracy. They love ignorance. It's not only about secular information, even about religious information. They don't want their children to know the whole of Quran. They usually read the Quran in a selective manner. Most of the Salafis know 5 to 6 verses from the Quran, all of them killing the infidels wherever you find them. This is a very selective reading of the Quran. They want to change the lifestyles of the people, yes, but not the regime. They don't have a solution for what kind of a regime they will establish. They are staunchly anti-Western, anti-modern, and anti-woman, anti-LGBT. They promote, as I said, ignorance because they believe much of the knowledge we have today is useless and, in fact, poison. I'm now moving to the fourth group where I mentioned the Hizmet movement of Turkey and all Sufi movements of Central Asia and some northwestern African countries, particularly Morocco. These movements differ from the first three groups in that they never appeal to political positions. They don't want to become coalition partners. They don't want to establish political parties. They are citizens, so they vote. They have political positions. In the case of Hizmet movement, for example, Hizmet has supported European Union membership of Turkey for all along its history. It supported further democratization of the country, democratization not only in Turkey but in all Muslim countries in the world. Improvement of the rights of the minorities, particularly religious minorities in Muslim countries, has always been a top one issue of Hizmet movement. They also want change in the society, but they believe the change starts in the individual and ends in the individual. In that sense, these are not sociological movements, these are socio-psychological and even psychological movements. Every member of or sympathizer of a Sufi group has his or her own story of joining the group. You cannot make the sociology of a Sufi, large Sufi group, how the Sufi groups are growing or collapsing and so on. It is rather a psychological phenomenon. In the case of Hizmet movement, we see this movement very active in education, establishing schools in and around Turkey. In fact, many people claim the number of schools in Turkey as about 1,000 and abroad, once again, 1,000 schools. In their schools, they don't believe in teaching religion. They believe religion can be taught only on the level of moral values, and it can be taught only by action, meaning setting a good example. Otherwise, it becomes an imposition, and this new generation does not like imposition, even from their fathers and mothers. Don't tell the people or the children what to do, but just do in front of them, and they will know how to do. This is their general strategy. They are very open to, and this is not only true for Hizmet, but for almost all Sufi movements, particularly the Sufi Mawlavi movements. This is what the Western world knows as Ar-Rumi, Jalaluddin Ar-Rumi's movement in Turkey, Mawlavi movement, and related movements are quite open to interfaith dialogue, and interfaith dialogue does not stay only at the level of just showing a beautiful face and smiling face to the non-Muslims, but at the stage of reading comparative texts of different religions and trying to take wisdom from the texts of other religions also. In that sense, I may compare their understanding of interfaith dialogue to the Kerugma understanding of the Catholic Church. Most of these movements believe that Islam can prosper, or religion, any religion, can prosper best under real secular conditions, because they believe that the religious discourse can prosper only if there is real freedom, and if freedom of expression, freedom of interpretation is also secured. Many people in the West usually refer to freedom of expression, freedom of press, freedom of consciousness, and so on, but they forget the freedom of interpretation. Usually, individuals in the streets in the Western world do not make interpretation of the Bible. But in the Muslim world, almost every single person does make, to a certain extent, interpretation of the Quran. In countries like Saudi Arabia, to some extent Iran, interpretation is imposed. There is a monopoly of interpretation at the hands of the religious elite. And the movements like Hizmet and Sufi movements, they abhor any kind of imposition of interpretation. In fact, I cannot say they are pluralist in nature, but they are certainly perspectivist in nature. Perspectivism is a term I am taking from Einstein's physics. When you look at my fingers from that way, some of you see only one finger, but certainly my colleagues here, see that I have three fingers looking at them. So according to the perspective you are coming from, your social, economic, cultural background, you have the right to understand the same text differently. That creates the richness base of the Sufi movement and Hizmet movement in Turkey. I will not dwell more on these groups, but I will enumerate the challenges that are awaiting all these four groups, particularly if they are to serve to the peaceful coexistence of their societies or to democratization in their societies. When looked at violent political movements like Hamas and Hezbollah, their real challenge is to leave violence and become only political movements. Hamas has been invited by international community, by Israel, by Al-Fatah for almost 10 years now to leave violence, to denounce violence, and to become a legitimate partner in peace process with Israel also. But unfortunately, for the last 10 years, we have not seen meaningful movement towards that path. But that is the challenge in front of Hamas. And I personally believe that once Hamas denounces violence, it will become a star of rising democratization in the Middle East, because the procedural, by means of the procedural democracy, they are even more stronger than Al-Fatah, which is mainly a corrupt political party. The challenge of unviolent or non-violent political groups like AK Party of Turkey or Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt is they have to resist the call for a lengthened stay in power. Whenever they come to power, they have to realize that they need to stay there for some time and then they need to leave. Otherwise, they turn out to be establishment parties. They start to believe that the state belongs to them. Further on, they start to believe that the people belongs to them. Because they use Quranic references, religious references, as they have more and more power, they become absolutist. There is a risk of them turning out to be autocratic or dictatorial regimes. That is a real challenge for them. In the case of AKP, unfortunately, we see no such trend towards intra-party democratization, but Prime Minister Erdogan has created a kind of personality cult around his name. For the time being, they are winning elections, but go and ask people what happens, God's sake, if Erdogan dies the day after, tomorrow. What will happen? And there is no solution in the party, in their own party. Also because the person himself has become so powerful, immensely powerful in the party, that nobody has a solution for the day after him. In August, Turkey will pass a presidential elections, and it is most probable that Erdogan himself is going to run and win the presidential post. But nobody knows who is going to be the prime minister after him, and nobody wants to see anybody other than Erdogan as a prime minister also. And the only solution is to turn the parliamentary system into a presidential one and do not have any prime ministers, and that is actually a sign of authoritarianism in the Turkish context. The violent apolitical movements like Salafi movements, well, I think they have to be converted into non-violent political movements. They have to establish political agenda. They have to endorse education. And in fact, looked from a security perspective, every country in the region has to fight with all their mights against the Salafi movements, in my understanding. When it comes to non-violent apolitical movements like Hizmet movement or Sufi movements, these are not political movements. They don't establish political parties, but by time they got strong and strong in the grassroots level, and political parties do appeal to them for their votes. And there is a certain level of seduction of politicization. I think the real danger for these movements, the real challenge is to stay out of politics. As long as they stay out of politics, they will contribute to the civil society in their countries, to the education of the society in their countries, and certainly continue on contributing peaceful coexistence of multiplicities. I will now jump to a rather unrelated, seemingly unrelated issue, but only one.
You have a couple of minutes.
Yes, a couple of minutes. Yes. Since we are in NYIT, I want to mention the role of technology in democratization of Middle Eastern countries. Many people regard the role of technology as isolated with the case of Twitter and Facebook and communication. In fact, yes. In the case of Arab Spring, to a certain extent, in the case of Gezi Park incidents in Turkey, we have seen youngsters using Twitter as an alternative venue of information gathering and information spreading. In most of those countries, there is a monopoly of information. In Syria, in Egypt, the state almost controls all of the TV channels. Even the privately owned TV channels are owned by pro-government individuals. Whenever the government changes, rarely, those individuals are changed also. In the case of Turkey, the AKP ran the last local elections with the support of 14 national TV channels and 7 national newspapers, all of them almost putting the same headline every day. So there is a strong monopoly over information in most of the Middle Eastern countries. Unfortunately, this is the case in Turkey also. So the modern technologies are helping to break the monopoly of government by means of distribution of information. But this is not only one case. Technology also helps and will certainly be more helpful in the future by means of preventing corruption, forgeries during the elections. For the time being, in most of the Middle Eastern countries, in countries where elections are made in the conventional ways, counting of the votes are made in conventional ways, and they are passed into, they are computerized only at the latest stage. And we have seen in many countries, particularly I have observed the latest local elections where there were several cases of corruption in counting the votes and in passing them to computers. So if we use in the future a rather computerized system of voting through emailing, through websites and so on, certainly there will be less possibilities of corruptions. I believe that a major problem of Middle Eastern democracies or future democracies is the strength of the state. The larger the state, the smaller the possibilities for democratization. Technology helps what we call nowadays M-state, mobile state. Usually citizens do go to the gates of the state and establish a kind of contact with the state in the gates of the state, be it a ministry or a police station or a school administration. And in those kinds of contexts, usually it is the state that shows its power, might, to the citizens and creates a kind of unbalanced relationship between the officials of the state and the citizens. But the more we start to use internet technology or mobile technology to do our job with the government, we will see the less number of officials. We will see less number of state gates, let me say. I'm using this term because it is this technology in Turkey is called the gate of state or electronic gate of state. So the more electronic gates we have, the less actual gates we will have, and this will certainly decrease the number of contacts between the citizen and the officials, and it will help democratization. One particular example, this is the last example that I am going to give, is the better working of the justice system. In most of the Middle Eastern countries, justice system is stuck with the number of court cases that are waiting there. Sometimes a court case may last as long as 30 years. You have a simple, criminal issue, and it takes 30 years. Several court cases are just abundant because of the time lapse between the opening of the court case and no decision is given. With the introduction of high technology, particularly computer technology, into the justice system, we have seen how the Turkish justice system improved immensely. And this was done under AKP. I'm not always critical of everything that AKP did, and the Turkish justice system started to work better. I do endorse some of the criticism made about the Turkish justice system, but this has nothing to do with the technology. I believe New York Institute of Technology and other relevant technology institutes do have a role in the democratization of all countries in the world, including the Middle Eastern countries, not only by these gatherings, but the very technology that they are developing. I thank to our hosts here and the Turkish Cultural Center, and of course to my listeners for their patience. Thank you.
Thank you.